Hello and good afternoon. It's Chris Plante coming to you from the studios at WMAL, and I'm here with my former colleague from CNN, Jamie McIntyre, who was the senior national security affairs correspondent, military affairs correspondent from CNN on September 11th. I was at that time already the senior producer, however, for national security affairs. And we were responsible for covering the Pentagon. We just wanted to sort of sit down and share our recollections of that day, a pretty extraordinary day, and I'll go ahead and start because I work here and you don't.
Because you were actually the first one to tell me what was going on, as was often the case because you were my producer.
That was my job.
Was to tell me what was going on.
Keep you you were just the talent.
Exactly.
And it began for me that morning when I was at home brushing my teeth, quite literally, and I was watching ABC News that morning, and I believe my recollection is that it was Diane Sawyer who was hosting that morning and anchoring that morning, and I saw an airplane. They announced it, and they said, well, an airplane appears to have hit one of the towers of the World Trade Center, and when I saw it, I said, I wonder, looking like a clear blue sky and a nice clear day, I wonder if this could be something other than an accident. And they were suggesting perhaps it was an accident. Naturally, Al-Qaeda came to mind, and Osama bin Laden and radical Islam, and I considered that as a possibility, particularly given the beautiful weather that day. I found it to be rather suspicious, and I called you on your cell phone. You were en route to the Pentagon.
I had just arrived in the parking lot, and you called me, and you said, hey, do you know what's going on in New York? And, of course, I didn't know, and you told me. And I rushed into the building to try to find out what was going on.
Into the Pentagon. And I, when we had our first conversation, I said, well, could be Al-Qaeda, and we were already up to speed on all of this.
Well, I remember, though, that coincidentally, I had happened to see a documentary on the History Channel just like 2 nights before about the building of the Empire State Building and how during, I think it was the 1940s, a plane hit the Empire State Building. You may recall this. And so it was funny because I just seen that, and I thought, well, how could that happen in this day and age? When the plane hit the military plane hit the Empire State Building, it was a foggy day in New York, and this was a bright, beautiful, clear day. And I kept thinking, how could this possibly happen? And of course, I was thinking, what were the military? Could it have been a military plane? Could it have been an accident? Could something else be going on?
And what role would we play for CNN that day in this when the plane hit the World Trade Center? You might think that New York City might look for support from the military. There might be military radar tracking the airplane. And then, of course, there was and we discussed this in our first phone call, the possibility that it was Al-Qaeda, that it was a radical Islamic terrorist attack.
So you hopped in your car and
bolted toward the Pentagon, living about 4 miles from the Pentagon. I was racing in.
And I raced into an admiral's office in the Joint Staff, not the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but the Joint Staff that supports the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And we're having a discussion about whether this could be a terrorist event or what. And he's basically saying, look, we have no idea what's going on. And we're watching it on CNN at the time. And then the second plane hits. And
then the second plane hit. And when the second plane hit, boom, you're done.
Everybody
it's Al-Qaeda. It's a radical Islamic terrorist attack. We're at war now. It's official. And as we discussed that day, this is a war that will go on for the rest of our lives and likely beyond, because now it has begun. This was the Pearl Harbor of our generation.
So a lot of people ask me, well, how did you know that a plane hit the Pentagon? Well, after this, we see the second plane hit World Trade Center. The Pentagon goes on high alert. I run back to my office. You're on your way in. And I begin to get these messages through our CNN computer system saying, Jamie, are you okay? Is everything all right there? And I'm thinking, why are they messaging me here? Because this is going on in New York. And I look up on CNN and I see that you are on the air on CNN explaining that there's a huge plume of smoke and a fire and something has happened at the Pentagon.
By cell phone. I'm out in the parking lot in my car. And I had phoned in rather than out of concern for you. I didn't phone you in the office, but I saw that your part of the building had not been hit. I phoned into the bureau, the Washington Bureau for CNN, to explain to them that this, as I was pulling into North Parking in the Pentagon, this enormous explosion and plume of flame and black smoke into the air. It was really quite extraordinary, and I called in to make them aware of this. So you guys aware of what just happened at the Pentagon? And I got this, I got a little attitude from the supervising producers there. Pardon me, but I think we're kind of busy. Are you aware of what's going on in New York? And I said, well, I am, but I believe that we may be getting our share of what's going on in New York here now as well. And then they put me on the air by cell phone.
Chris Plante, a CNN producer, is at the Pentagon where there is a significant fire. Chris, you're on the phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Tell me what you know.
Well, arriving at the Pentagon a short time ago, there was a huge plume of smoke which continues to rise from the west side of the Pentagon over in the area where there is a helicopter landing zone. It's along Route 27 if you're looking at maps of the area. The building is currently being evacuated, and police and emergency units are, of course, responding from all around the building and from the local Arlington County Fire Department. The plume of smoke is enormous. It's a couple of 100 yards across. At its base, it is billowing into the sky, hundreds of yards. It's impossible for me to say from this side of the building whether the building itself is on fire or up in flames, or exactly what caused this. I did not hear an explosion, but there is certainly a very, very significant fire in this enormous office building on the west front. The building is being evacuated. The Defense Protective Service officers, the police force for the Pentagon, are on a very tight string right now. As I arrived, I was held at gunpoint.
And of course, the report now, not to be defensive about it or anything, I told you what I could tell you based on what I knew and could say with certainty at the time. I did not see with my own eyes the airplane coming in. It came in very low. I was on the other side of the building. I did see the explosion and the plume, and it was obviously a major event. It would be quite an unusual coincidence for this to happen on the same day that Al-Qaeda was now obviously attacking New York. But I'd have to say, well, I'm not necessarily thrilled with the report looking back on it. I said what I could say with certainty from where I was at the time.
Eventually, I started making my way around outside, and you remember this, too, because you were already outside, but then came the announcement that another plane could be on the way to the Pentagon.
Right. Well, first, and before we get to that part, I was making my way around. I stopped at one of the Pentagon police guard shacks, then the Defense Protective Service guard shacks, by the entrance where we walked in. And normally there was a police officer there that I know that I would say hello to in the morning. Well, that day it was a different officer there. And I came roaring up in my big fat American car, and I hopped out in a suit, with wraparound sunglasses on. And I had my cell phone.
You do look like a Men in Black.
A little
Lincoln Townhouse car.
A little trouble the way I look when I go to airport security and things. And that day was no exception. I had my cell phone on my belt, but with a headset on, a Johnny Space Commander style headset, with the wire running down the front of my person. And as I raced up to the guard shack in a very large automobile, American, thank you, and I jumped out and went to jog up to the guard shack. Well, the guy inside the guard shack was not the guy who would recognize me ordinarily, and he jumped out and drew his weapon, his 9mm, and screamed a stream of obscenities at me, threatening to kill me on the spot, and understandably so. He's trained to respond to what might be a coordinated attack or something. And he had me do kind of the hokey pokey and, turn around, put my hands on the roof and turn around. I had my Pentagon badge around my neck, but that was no help at that point. And I was pretty close to being shot right there, which would have been very inconvenient at best. And after we had a brief discussion, I got back in my car. I made my way around to the other side of the building, out under Route 27 on the west side, the west front of the Pentagon. You, at that time, were making your way out also from the interior of the building. And as I arrived there, Route 27 was nearly vacant. There was almost nobody there. There was, part of it may have been the light, the street lights that had been knocked down by the airplane laying across Route 27. One of them had crashed through the windshield and across the hood, you may remember, of a cab driver. It was a Lincoln. I remember it was a Lincoln town car, and the windshield was smashed out and the hood was smashed. And I went up to the guy and I asked him, I said, well, what happened? Tell me what happened. And he said that, damn plane, and he was cursing too. The plane almost hit him, and the street light, it hit the street light, and it threw the street light through his windshield, and he was quite angry. And I remember saying to him before I rushed away, I said, well, I certainly hope that your insurance covers terrorism. Mm-hmm. And I went over toward the hole in the side of the Pentagon, and I encountered somebody that I knew outside the building, somebody that works in the Pentagon, and as I was jogging in to go, render assistance or whatever it is that you do, I was running toward the incident site, and the guy stopped me and he said, "Listen, if you don't have any medical training," he asked me if I have any medical training. No, EMT or something. He said, "If you don't have any medical training, then it's probably best if you just stay out of the way, because we're trying to keep it limited to EMTs and that sort of thing." So I turned around, started calling CNN and getting back in touch. We were both in the same area, but we didn't actually meet up for a while.
Well, what happened was, I immediately ran out to the center courtyard because that was the fastest way to get across to the other side of the building. And, of course, I couldn't get to the other side of the building. But the center courtyard was full of people, including witnesses who told me what was going on. And I immediately ran back to the office. This was within about 10 minutes of when the plane hit, to give my first report, because as a reporter, my instinct is to get on the air with what information I had. And I'd seen a lot, even though I hadn't seen the actual impact zone. And I knew that you were out there. So I ran in and I began to give my first report from our office in the Pentagon. And as I'm giving the report, my very first report on the air, Aaron Brown interrupts me. He stops me and says, "Wait a minute, Jamie, I'm sorry, I have to stop you." And he turns around and the first of the two towers collapses behind him.